5 strategic interview questions to ask candidates. A fantastic piece of advice I had, from my father and also from the interviews of the billionaire Jack Ma, is to not have a business as your first job. Meaning, be an employee before becoming an employer. To have a boss and receive a salary may sound dreadful for some, but it has benefits that contribute to entrepreneurial formation. One important lesson of looking for a job is to take part in job interviews as a candidate, not as the interviewer. Before starting my first business, I worked for 5 different companies, and at each of them, I attended one or multiple interviews. Some questions were brilliant. Even if I never got the job, I would leave it with a great impression of their hiring processes. Others, not so much. When I became an entrepreneur, during the first year of my business, I needed to hire 12 people for the initial team. That meant close to 40 interviews. From my previous experiences as an employee and candidate, I knew the basics of interviewing, but I lacked deep insight into what mattered. That, in part, caused an unsatisfactory staff turnover. I joined the dots and recognized 3 crucial points that often recruiters ignore. First, problem-solving skills. Problem-solving is an ability that nobody knows if it is a soft or a hard skill, or both. It would be foolish to expect that a candidate for a junior position solves an enigma of proprietary systems out of the blue. Training exists for this reason. But problem-solving skills go beyond that. Way beyond that. Here is an example from my final interview when applying for a job as a revenue analyst for a global airline. My previous experiences were as a stockbroker and a financial analyst. I had little idea how airlines worked, and that is why I applied for a trainee position. The final interviewer was the area director. The boss of my boss. After a few questions about my college degree and previous experiences, and he gave me a case to solve. A case about airline pricing and demand management. Blimey, I will never get this job. Knowing that my chances were negligible, at least I tried to ask a few questions about things out of my understanding. Is this plane single cabin, or it has multiple classes like economy, business, and first class? What ancillary services can we sell to increase the revenue? Etc. The interview took longer than I expected. The solution I gave, in my understanding, was at best laughable. I will not get the job anyway, but at least they served me a good coffee. Back home, 2 weeks later, I received a call. Although I applied for a trainee job, they offered me a position as a senior analyst. What? Weeks later, I started my new job, never asking why they offered me a position above my expectations. If they made a mistake, sorry, but it will not be up to me to remind them. A certain day, at the company cafeteria, I met the director with one of his managers, and they greeted me. When I presented myself, the manager commented, "Oh, you are the one that realized it was missing a lot of information in that case study." Me. All that I did was ask questions and try to solve the case without shaming myself. Identifying incomplete information is one of the greatest demonstrations of problem-solving skills. Oh, now I see why they chose me. Second, listening skills and self-consciousness. An entire interview focused on technicalities that can be easily learned on the job is nonsense. But there is a problem with learning on site. We are living in an era where human attention span decreased to levels smaller than that of a goldfish. The widespread attention deficit often hinders the learning curve. Even worse, it makes people bad listeners, and later they try to solve questions they didn't listen to. In customer-facing positions, this is a recipe for disaster. But even for the back office guy whose most interactions are with the secretary, it still doesn't help. Nobody likes to get interrupted or to repeat the same sentence 5 times. Besides hampering problem solving and social interactions, bad listening abilities walk hand in hand with a lack of self-consciousness. That means a bad understanding of one's own acts and consequences. For smaller businesses, this can be tragic. A bad listener with a lack of self-consciousness will often blame you or the customer. Most customers don't like to get the blame for others' mistakes. Third, adverse situations in life and past initiative. There is a question that was almost omnipresent during the best interviews I had. What has been the most challenging circumstance you faced? Or, tell me about a difficult situation you experienced. We grow during tough times, as long as we survive them with no serious sequels. They test our limits and stretch our capabilities. They make us more robust, resilient, sometimes even anti-fragile. Still, almost no one wants to struggle, preferring an Instagram life, and often, that is what candidates present during interviews. Big mistake, because life does not work this way. Interviews that focus on immaculate grades and seamless career instead of approaching obstacles are a waste of time for both candidate and executive. Hard times providing important lessons is one of the few things we can rely on. Even better when these troubles excite human initiative. The past initiatives are the best indicator of future initiatives. As Belsky said, look beyond the formal resume, and ask candidates about their interests and what they have done to pursue them. To assess them, after the previously suggested question, what has been the most challenging circumstance you faced? It is enough to ask, how did you react to it? Or, did you solve it? How? Conclusion? I consider final interviews focused on technicalities a waste of time that is expensive since it often involves high-level executives. The candidate's technical knowledge should be vetted before the final interview because these flaws can be solved by training. What training does not solve, at least not that easily, is what we should assess before hiring. Abilities like problem-solving skills, self-consciousness, and attentive listening. Past initiatives and reaction under adverse situations. During final interviews that often take less than half an hour, time is better used asking about these 3 points instead of GPA scores. What is your opinion about those questions during interviews? Let us know in the comments.